Hey, everybody, we're back with another episode. I think we are on number 11 on this series of hiring and retaining DJ staff. I'm here with Chris Romero from Cutmaster Music out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Chris, how you doing, man?
Doing good. I enjoying the 60-degree weather out here while everybody else in the country freezes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're kind of speaking to heating up your employees and making sure that everybody's firing on all cylinders here. We're going to be talking about evaluating staff and how you kind of check in with them and just make sure that they're hitting their numbers or doing what they're supposed to do. I'll kind of start on this one. For us, we really believe in yearly reviews. Like, that has to be something that's done. I think not only does it need to be done for the employee's sake, but more so for your company development as well, and just kind of evolution there. I think the feedback in that sometimes, like we'd spoken in a previous episode about, making sure you're relational and not transactional. So many times this stuff can kind of go down that path of just like collecting a paycheck. And then you beat them down when you get to the review process. I think you can learn more about your company through some dialogue and some conversation in these reviews, more than you even realize. And we actually missed out, was it 2 years ago, on doing a review, and we lost a person because of it. And they said, we just feel like we were connected at all. Like, we haven't checked in. Like, we have team meetings all the time, but like, there's not a whole lot of stuff going on with like respect to how I'm doing and all that. And I was like, really? Like, that mattered that much to this person? And so it reinforced our need. In fact, we really tried to do a good job of doing it twice a year, mid-year and end of the year, because we want to have a benchmark of like, hey, this is where some things you can improve on or some things you're doing amazing in halfway through before we get into the crazy fall season, which I think we all have a crazy fall. I think it doesn't matter where you are on the map. And want to make sure that that's hidden by the time we're hitting there. So I think reviews and mid-year reviews are a huge way of evaluating staff. At least for us, that's one of the biggest things I can recommend. What about you?
I am absolutely going to reinforce that. At minimum, you need to be doing a mid-year and an end of the year review. We like to do quarterly, and I call them pulse checks.
Ooh, that's good.
And so basically what we're doing, I mean, go on Google Forms, create you put your questions on there that you want to send out, and get a check on your company, not only as individuals, but the feedback that you're going to get from that, and I'm just doing it mainly with our core members. I'm not like photo booth attendants and those sort of people. Like, I'm not sending reviews out to them and getting checks with them, but right. Our team leads, the DJ leads and guys like that are integral to your company. You got to get a check-in with them. I want to get an idea of where we're at, how we're doing individually, how we're doing as a group, because just like you said, Brian, sometimes I might think that things are this way, and then all of a sudden I see from 4, 5, 6 of our members that they answer a certain question another way, and I had absolutely no idea, right? Well, if you let that go on for a year, you lose members, you lose guys, and it absolutely can. You have to be in tune with your culture and with your company. And I think the only way to do that are to have these, like we call them the pulse checks. It helps me out so much to get an idea of where we stand, throughout the year.
Right. Well, to that point, we don't do them quarterly, but another pulse checking way that we've developed in our own team, structure is by having end of event form reviews. In other words, or I shouldn't call it, what do we call them? End of event. We call them an EOE, but basically they have to go on after every event and fill out a form.
Evaluation.
There you go. And this has been invaluable, because if we start seeing like little, things that are happening, like this guy's always having an issue with a specific piece of gear, or hey, I was late, or, any of those kinds of little things. Those are other metrics that you can use to like maybe pull somebody in before that mid-year review or before that quarterly review. Right. Having a process in place so that, it's different nowadays than it used to be, where, you'd have guys coming in, everything's direct deposit for us. So we don't have guys picking up checks from us. And, when I worked for a multi-op back in the day, I'd come and pick up my check and we would be talking about like war stories from the weekend. Well, now in this generation, that's just not something that happens. And so these end of event forums are so much better, especially as your team grows and you start to get to like 10 or 15 guys. Like, you don't have time to call every guy and check in.
Right.
So, I mean, you could, it would just take up all your day. So now this kind of makes the process a little bit quicker by having them kind of fill out this form. And yes, it's a little bit, removed from that personal connection, but even if you're able to reply back and say, hey, I got this, that's so good, glad to hear, whatever, it's still a connection point. So I think those EOE forms, are huge for us to evaluate for us. And one other one I throw out there is actually going and spying on your guys or ladies. And I think it's a mistake if you tell them that you're coming to an event and now they can put their best foot forward. They're there 3 hours early, to set up and stuff like this. But if you go unannounced and just kind of pop in, usually for me as the owner, I already know the venue really well. Like, I've already fostered those relationships. So I'll even tell them, hey, listen, I'm coming in just to kind of just check, more of less just like, quality control, if you will.
Right.
And they love it. They love the fact that first of all, letting them know I'm coming means that I am taking a vested interest in their clientele and in my own company. That, hey, I'm not just here to make a quick buck. I'm actually trying to check in our guys. And, I'm not like I'm in a bush somewhere, hiding, or whatever. But, I wait to make the reveal obvious, and at some point I will. Although there has been a few times where I haven't had to make the reveal obvious. I could just kind of like hide back there and, be super grateful for it or
Sit
whatever.
at a table and just have dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. Go through the buffet. No, but it's been great because then I can have firsthand account of what's happening. And it's another way to kind of evaluate them and go, man, you just crushed that grad entrance. Like, that was so good. Like, the way you set that up or the way you did this or that, like, it's just a great way to kind of keep the pulse on it. And I don't do this all the time.
I think that's such a great idea. I am absolutely going to steal that from you. Yeah. I need to get more guys so I can go spy on them.
That's the key. Is that, obviously I can't do it every weekend.
Right.
But when I can and I have an off weekend, it takes me a couple. I mean, I'm not going to be there for the whole event, clearly.
Right.
But even if I'm there for 2 hours and I go and I see guys doing different parts of it, like if I know an area of struggle is a dance set, then I'm going to go see that guy do just the dance set because I want to just see how that's happening. I don't have to stay for the entire event. You know what I mean?
Right. Totally.
What about for you, any other kind of evaluation techniques outside of just those kind of meetings and pulse checking and all that kind of stuff?
I think for me, what I want to do is get an idea of where my staff are at mentally, and especially at different times of the year, because it's different, right? Like right now, I always find at the end of the first quarter, like we've had hardly any events, compared to like quarters 2 and 3. And usually after that third quarter, and especially at the end of the year, like most of our guys are drained, like they're just mentally, it's not the same. So I definitely want to get a gauge of where they're at mentally, and not even just for that time of year. So I use the mid-year and the end of year reviews to also focus not only just on the micro, but the macro. And I want to get an idea of where their mindset is at on the bigger picture. So I might ask questions like, where do you see yourself with Cutmaster Music in the next 1 to 2 years? What is your job after Cutmaster Music? Because those little questions like that will tell me some things of where they're at mentally. We have some guys that'll say, you know what, I'm really not sure. Or they might tell me right away, I see myself doing this. Recently, we had one of our light techs, he let me know he's looking at going to school in August in Florida. Had I not asked him that question last year and waited, I may not, and who knows, I'm sure he would have told me at some point in time, but but it's better to find that out like I did last year in 2018 than to find out in June of 2019 and he's leaving in 2 months, right?
Totally agree. Yeah, that's good. I think those regular check-ins are just so invaluable. I had 2 more tips I wrote down for evaluating staff. One is another way of kind of doing this at the event is to actually bring your camera and record them. So not just like, and by camera, it could be your phone. So I'm not saying you got to have a full setup or anything like that, but just like, I had one gal that she was a DJ for us and she would have no problem with me sharing this story, but she basically we had trained them on doing grand entrances, and that's a big part of our training process. But for whatever reason, it was this awkward time where she asked everybody to stand, and then they just remained standing for like the first dance. And in our area, what we train our guys or ladies to do is to have them seated once if they're at their tables. And it was just like this awkward, like, should I sit? Should I stand? Kind of from the guest perspective.
Right.
And I don't think without me recording this wasn't necessarily, this is like me nitpicking, but it was that kind of nitpicking that was in a good way, because she didn't even realize it from her vantage point that was happening. But once I pointed out, she's like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like, I totally see it. And she made that change. And if I hadn't have recorded that, I don't think I could have verbally, shown it in a way that she would have been able to really get. If that makes sense.
So great. Absolutely. We see things so differently from behind the decks, right? Than from the guest perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great.
One other thing I wrote down here was on our team meetings. We don't do them as much anymore because our guys are more seasoned, so we don't meet monthly. But for a long time, we would do monthly meetings, and every 2 or 3 of those would be something that would be skill driven. In other words, like I might come up with, I don't know, 50 songs on a piece of paper, like, and put them in like a little jar, and we'd all have to draw out like 10 songs a piece or whatever. And we have to put together a set based on whatever songs that we pull out. We might do a grand battle of the grand entrances. And that's another way to evaluate your talent and evaluate your staff and where they're at, because not only are they hearing it from the boss or whatever, but they're seeing their teammates or, work, folks that are doing in the same, we're all in the same kind of grind. You might learn something from one of them. I mean, some of my best grand entrance techniques or whatever were learned from people who already work for me. They did something, a little spin on something. I was like, ooh, I really like that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I was, and our other folks have learned some stuff from that as well. So I think you definitely don't minimize the ability of those team meetings just to be informational driven. Like, hey, here's the latest pricing update or, whatever. This is a great chance to kind of evaluate your staff and your talent within through those meetings. And I wouldn't do it every one. That can get old really fast, and people feel like it's always a test. But if you sprinkle it in there, it gets things a little bit, mixed up, and it feels good. Like, hey, you're keeping it fresh.
If you don't have touch points with your staff, it makes it tough for you to grow and expand. The same thing, just by having these little evaluations and pulse checks and things like that. We've had so many great things come about it. One of the things that we're doing that actually, I didn't even come up with this. Billy sitting over here said, hey, can we do some mock events, especially during this time of year, to just set up some gear. We can train some guys. We can get on the decks a little bit, and just for an hour or two, maybe grab some pizza, and we'll just do like a little mock event. And I'm like, absolutely. Like,
yeah, it's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. Like little things like that, right? Just like, if you don't check in with your guys and your ladies and get feedback and have the bouncing back and forth,
right,
none of these things will ever come about, so.
Totally. One last tip, and this is one that I didn't have it written down, but it hit me when you were talking, was bringing in somebody from the outside to watch your people. And this could be one of 2 ways. One of the best ways is people in our industry that specialize in a certain skill set. I actually, a guy like Mike Walter in our industry who's, crushing it with grand entrances, and just he's instructed and shown so many people how to do it in a way that works for 90% of the crowds out there. Having him kind of look at your staff, he knows how to kind of delicately give feedback, and the plug for Mobile Beat, if you're going this year, that's something that he's going to be doing. But it's invaluable because they may take that advice or whatever better from somebody on the outside than they would from like me directly. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Because it's somebody else who's polished, who's doing it and doing it on a big level. So I think you could get somebody in there. We had Joe Bunn come out to our place in Florida, and I can't remember what he spoke on now. It may have been social media, but we just kind of evaluated our social media platforms and like what we could do better. And though that wasn't a skill that you would really use at an event, it was a skill that was invaluable for these guys and something that they could take with them wherever they go. Whether they're in the DJ field or not, there's still some things that can apply there. So I think bringing in somebody from the outside is big, and it doesn't have to even be like an instructor. The other way we've done it, similar to your concept of mock events, we'll do a battle of the grand entrances, and we'll bring in some planners. We'll bring in some people, almost like American Idol style. Not that they're giving their feedback right then and there, but like, hey, this is a way for them maybe to see some new talent on your staff potentially too. So it's a great win-win. And we have them fill out like a small eval form on each person as they're doing these little things, and make it super simple. But it's like great feedback because they're hearing from not me. Again, it's a different voice, but somebody who's like referring us out. Like, these are some of the things she's seeing or hearing or whatever. And it just carries a little bit different weight in a good way. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, that makes absolute sense. I love that.
Cool. Well, guys, we're going to sign off on this one, and we've got another episode we'll have coming up for you here shortly. Thanks so much.